Your brain is stuck in alert mode at night. If you wake up at 3 a.m. and your mind is suddenly wide awake, thoughts racing, body exhausted, but your brain won't shut off, this is not just insomnia like most people assume. There's a deeper pattern happening beneath the surface, something most people never realize is even there, and it changes the way your nights actually work. And when you try to fall asleep again, but something inside feels on, like your body is tired but your brain refuses to power down, that strange mismatch is not random or psychological weakness. Sleep science shows this isn't simply a sleep problem, it's a state where your brain is actively preventing rest. A hidden internal switch stays partially activated, keeping you alert at the exact moment you should be letting go. This is what it means to have a brain stuck in alert mode at night, and it explains why you can't sleep through the night, why you wake up at 3 a.m. without a clear reason, and why going back to sleep feels almost impossible. But what's really happening inside your brain at that moment is not what most people think, and that's where everything starts to shift. I'm Dr. Sarah, a sleep medicine specialist with a background in psychiatry. And over the years, I've worked with thousands of people who feel completely drained during the day, but the moment night comes, something shifts inside them. Especially after 40, this pattern becomes more frequent, more confusing, and often more frustrating to deal with because it doesn't follow the rules most people expect. Many of them tell me the same exact story. They fall asleep without much trouble at first, but then suddenly wake up at 3 a.m. wide awake. Their body feels heavy and tired, yet their mind turns on like a switch has been flipped. And no matter how much they try to relax, their brain simply refuses to shut off again. They start searching for answers everywhere, trying different routines, supplements, habits, hoping to finally understand how to stay asleep all night. But what makes this so frustrating is that nothing seems to fully explain the pattern. It feels inconsistent, unpredictable, almost personal, like their own brain is working against them. And over time, this creates something deeper, not just physical exhaustion, but a quiet sense of confusion and loss of control. Because when sleep becomes unstable, everything during the day starts to feel harder. Focus drops, energy disappears, and even simple tasks begin to feel heavier. What most people don't realize is that this pattern is not random at all. There's a very specific biological reason why the brain activates at night like this. And it's something I've seen consistently across different patients, different lifestyles, and even different levels of overall health. What I'm going to explain next comes directly from modern sleep science, and once you understand this mechanism, you'll start to see your sleep in a completely new way. Because the real issue isn't just falling asleep, it's something happening inside the brain itself, right at the moment when it should be letting go. Most people believe this happens because of stress, or because their mind is overthinking too much at night, or maybe they assume it's just bad sleep habits that somehow got out of control over time. So they try to fix it by relaxing more, changing routines, avoiding screens, doing everything right, hoping that eventually sleep will stabilize again. And for a while, that explanation feels convincing, because stress does affect sleep and habits do play a role in how the body winds down. But here's what starts to create confusion. Many people follow all the recommended steps. They improve their routines consistently, and the problem still keeps happening anyway. They still wake up at 3 a.m., they still feel their brain suddenly switch on, they still experience that racing mind at night even when there's nothing specific to think about. And when they try to fall asleep again, it feels like something deeper is blocking the process, like the brain is choosing to stay awake. This is the moment where frustration begins to grow, because it stops making sense logically. If it were just stress or bad habits, then doing the right things should fix it. But when it doesn't, people start questioning themselves, wondering if they're missing something obvious or if their sleep is somehow different from others. But the truth is, the pattern itself is the clue. Waking up at the same time, feeling alert in the middle of the night, being tired but unable to fully return to sleep, these are not random symptoms. They are signals of a specific internal state, one that most people have never been taught to recognize. So the real question becomes clearer now. Why does the brain stay active when the body is clearly exhausted? Why does it resist shutting down exactly when rest is needed the most? And what is actually controlling that switch between sleep and sudden alertness? Sleep science has identified a state we can describe as the Neural Sleep Inhibition Response. It's not something most people have heard of, but it explains this exact pattern with surprising clarity. A condition where the brain doesn't fully allow sleep to happen, even when the body is clearly exhausted and ready to rest, creating a subtle but powerful internal conflict at night. In this state, the issue is not the ability to sleep. The brain still knows how to initiate sleep normally, which is why many people fall asleep at the beginning of the night. But something changes during the deeper phases, when the brain is supposed to fully let go of control. Instead of transitioning into stable, restorative sleep, it maintains a level of quiet alertness beneath the surface. This is where the experience starts to feel strange, because from the outside, nothing seems wrong. You went to bed, you fell asleep, everything looked normal, but internally, the brain never fully disengaged. It stayed partially active, monitoring, scanning, holding on to a state that prevents complete shutdown, even without any real external threat present. That's why waking up feels so sudden. One moment you're asleep, and the next your mind is completely awake, not groggy, not slowly emerging, but instantly alert, as if something triggered it. And even if you try to relax again, that underlying activation doesn't fully disappear. Because this is not driven by conscious thought, it's not just overthinking or mental noise, it's a deeper biological response linked to the nervous system and internal regulation. A pattern involving cortisol timing, circadian rhythm instability, and how the brain interprets safety during the night.
So it's not that your brain can't sleep, it's that it doesn't feel safe enough to stay asleep. And as long as that state remains active, sleep becomes light, fragmented, and unstable, which leads to the question most people never ask. What exactly is causing the brain to stay in this partially alert mode at night? Think of your brain like a night security system, not something abstract or distant, but an active system constantly scanning for safety. Even while you sleep, it keeps monitoring quietly, deciding whether it's safe to fully power down or not. And most of the time, when everything feels stable, this system allows sleep to unfold naturally and deeply. When the brain detects safety, everything shifts. The nervous system begins to slow down, your breathing becomes more regular and calm, melatonin rises to support deeper sleep cycles, and the internal sleep switch fully activates. This is when sleep feels continuous, restorative, and you're able to stay asleep through the night. But this process depends on one key condition. The brain has to feel safe enough to let go, because deep sleep requires vulnerability, a temporary release of control and awareness. And if anything inside the system feels off, even in a subtle or unconscious way, that full release simply doesn't happen. Instead, the brain shifts into alert mode at night, not a dramatic or obvious alert, but a quiet, persistent state of vigilance. Your body may appear relaxed, but internally, the system is more active than it should be. It's watching, monitoring, staying ready, even when there's no real danger present. This shift directly affects key biological signals. Cortisol may rise earlier than it should, your circadian rhythm becomes less stable, and the timing of your sleep cycles gets disrupted. So instead of staying in deep, continuous sleep, your brain moves toward lighter stages, making it easier to wake up suddenly. This is the neural sleep inhibition response in action, a state where the brain prioritizes vigilance over rest even when the body is asking for recovery. And once this pattern is active, it explains why sleep becomes fragmented, why your mind turns on in the middle of the night, and why staying asleep starts to feel out of reach. This is why you wake up at 3 a.m., not slowly, not drifting in and out, but suddenly, with your mind already online. One moment you're asleep, and the next your brain is fully online again, as if something inside decided it was time to wake up, even though your body still needs rest. And that immediate activation feels very specific. Your thoughts start moving quickly, sometimes without a clear reason or direction. It's not always worry or stress, but there's a sense of internal movement, a racing mind at night that wasn't there before, as if the brain just switched into a different mode. Then you try to go back to sleep. You adjust your position, close your eyes, maybe try to relax your breathing or clear your mind. But something feels different now. Your body is still tired, your eyes feel heavy, yet your brain remains alert beneath the surface. This is where the disconnect becomes obvious, because physically you're ready for sleep, but neurologically something is still active. The system hasn't fully turned off, and that subtle activation keeps you pulling back up. So even when you're close to drifting off again, you don't fully cross into deep sleep. And if you do fall asleep again, it often doesn't feel the same. Sleep becomes lighter, more fragile, easier to break, less restorative overall. You may wake up again shortly after or drift in and out without realizing it, never reaching the depth your body actually needs. This entire pattern is not random. It's the neural sleep inhibition response maintaining control, keeping your brain in a state of partial alertness. So instead of allowing continuous sleep, it interrupts, fragments, and destabilizes the night. And the deeper question now becomes, why does this state intensify even more for some people over time? After 40, this pattern becomes noticeably more common, not suddenly and not in an obvious way, but gradually as the body's internal systems shift over time. Many people who never had sleep issues before start experiencing interruptions during the night, waking up at 3 a.m. without understanding why, and feeling like their sleep is no longer stable. This happens because the body becomes more sensitive to cortisol. The same hormone that helps regulate alertness and energy starts to fluctuate more easily during the night. Small internal changes that once had no effect now become enough to activate the brain. So instead of staying in deep, continuous sleep, the system reacts earlier than it should. At the same time, the circadian rhythm becomes less stable. The internal clock that once followed a predictable pattern begins to lose some of its precision. Sleep cycles may shorten slightly, transitions between stages become less smooth, and the timing of key signals shifts subtly, making the night more vulnerable to interruptions. So even subtle imbalances can trigger alert mode, not strong enough to fully wake you at first, but enough to prevent deep, stable sleep from holding. And once the brain shifts into that state, it becomes easier to fully wake up soon after. This is where the pattern of 3 a.m. awakening starts to repeat itself more consistently. This is why many people begin struggling with insomnia after 40, even if they slept well for most of their lives. It's not that sleep suddenly breaks, but that the system becomes more sensitive and reactive. And when combined with the neural sleep inhibition response, it creates a pattern that feels persistent and difficult to control, which leads to an even deeper question about what happens next. Over time, this pattern starts to accumulate in subtle ways. Sleep becomes broken, interrupted in the middle of the night, no longer deep enough to fully restore the body. You wake up in the morning feeling tired, even after spending enough hours in bed, as if the night didn't actually count as real rest, and your energy never fully resets. This leads to a very specific kind of fatigue, not just physical tiredness, but mental heaviness that follows you through the day. Focus becomes harder to maintain, simple tasks require more effort, and your mind feels slightly slower than usual, like it's always trying to catch up. There's also a constant feeling of unrest beneath everything. Even when you're not actively thinking about sleep, your system feels slightly off balance. Moments of calm don't feel as deep, and there's a quiet background tension that you can't fully explain or turn off because it's coming from inside the system itself. And this is where the emotional weight begins to build. Many people start thinking something is wrong with them. They question their habits, their discipline, their health, wondering why they can't fix something that seems so basic. It becomes personal, frustrating, and sometimes even discouraging over time, especially when no clear answer appears. But this is not a failure, and it's not a sign that your body is broken. What's happening is actually very precise, even if it doesn't feel that way from the outside. Your brain is following a pattern, responding to internal signals in a specific way, even if those signals are being misinterpreted. It's your brain trying to protect you, just at the wrong time. The neural sleep inhibition response is not random. It's a safety mechanism that became overactive at night. And once you see it from this perspective, the entire experience starts to shift. Because if the brain learned this pattern, it also means there's a way to guide it back out of it, which brings us to what actually changes the state. The important part is this. This state is reversible, even as it feels persistent right now. Because what you're experiencing is not damage, and it's not something permanently broken in your system. It's a pattern your brain has learned to maintain at night. And like any learned pattern, it can be adjusted once the right internal conditions are restored. The brain is not working against you. It's responding to signals the way it was designed to. But in this case, those signals are being interpreted incorrectly, triggering the neural sleep inhibition response at the exact moment when the brain should be letting go. So instead of allowing deep, continuous sleep, it maintains a layer of alertness beneath the surface. What changes everything is not force, not trying harder to sleep, and not shutting the brain down artificially. The shift happens when the brain starts receiving the right biological signals again, signals that communicate safety, stability, and the absence of any need for nighttime vigilance. As those signals begin to stabilize, cortisol levels start aligning with the natural rhythm, no longer rising prematurely during the night. The nervous system gradually moves out of alert mode, allowing deeper relaxation to take place, and the internal sleep switch can finally activate fully instead of being partially blocked. This is when sleep begins to feel different. Not forced, not fragile, but continuous and naturally sustained. The brain no longer interrupts the process, and the transitions between sleep cycles become smoother. Instead of waking up in the middle of the night, the system stays in the state it was meant to maintain. And the body can finally sleep through the night again, not because something external forced it, but because the internal environment allowed it. Which leads to a very practical question. How do you actually provide those signals to the brain in a way that supports this shift consistently without creating dependence or resistance over time? That's why some approaches today focus on supporting the brain, not forcing sleep. Instead of trying to override the system, they work by aligning with how the brain naturally functions, helping it shift out of alert mode at night and return to a state where sleep can happen on its own without pressure or resistance. These approaches often include natural compounds that support the body's nighttime biology, helping regulate cortisol levels more consistently, supporting healthy melatonin release, and reducing unnecessary alert signals in the brain, not by shutting anything down, but by restoring balance where it was lost. As this balance begins to return, the brain no longer feels the need to stay on guard.
The nervous system starts to settle more deeply, and the conditions for stable sleep become available again. This creates a different kind of experience at night, where sleep feels continuous instead of fragile, and the mind no longer activates without reason. As a complementary way to support this process, there are specific formulations designed to work alongside the brain's natural rhythms, not as a replacement for sleep, but as a way to guide the system back into alignment, especially for those dealing with persistent awakenings and difficulty staying asleep through the night. There's one in particular that I trust and often recommend based on how it supports these exact mechanisms. You can find it in the first pinned comment below, along with more details on how it works with the body. It's designed to be safe, gradual, and supportive, without creating dependence or forcing sedation, but instead helping the brain reestablish stability. It's not about sedation, it's about restoring balance within the system. And once that balance begins to return, the brain can finally allow sleep to happen naturally again. And in the next video, I'll explain why the brain tends to activate at exactly 3 a.m. to 3:30 a.m., what that reveals about your internal clock, and why this pattern is directly connected to your ability to stay asleep all night.